Well, good morning, committee. Welcome back. Today we're going to wrap up the Department of Agriculture and the Kansas State Fair, which we heard part of yesterday. And then with the remaining time, we'll start on the Kansas Water Office. So first, we'll pick up where we left yesterday. We was on the Department of Agriculture, and wanted to spend some time talking about conservation districts and a little information on that. So why don't we have some the profile first on what it was, what it is. You received in your packet a testimony from conservation districts. So if everybody had a chance to look at that. In case you didn't, we might want to just review that. And Sean, you want to talk about that a little bit? Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Sean Miller with the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts. We submitted written testimony yesterday. You should have it in your packet from Dan Meyerhoff, but because we sort of ran a little close yesterday, I asked the chairman if I could, she has it, yes ma'am. I asked the chairman if I could say just a couple of words to explain what we have. The Kansas Association of Conservation Districts represents the local conservation districts found in 102 counties across the state. We serve all 105 counties. And our budget item is generally reflected in that aid to conservation districts line that you see either on the State Water Plan Fund or in the Department of Ag budget. That money, statutorily, it's supposed to be $25,000 a county that is leveraged and matched by local counties. So the county can put in through the county commission as much money as they want, but the state will match up to $25,000 per statute. If the county only puts in 20, the state only puts in 20. Budget cuts over the last 10 years or so, that 25,000 number has sort of dwindled. We're down at around 22.2 per county. Last year, in the budget that was passed by the House and Senate, you guys enhanced that by $150,000. So you got us about 23.5, right, per county. Because it was an enhancement, when the COVID revenue restrictions kicked in, the governor allotted a lot of enhancements on July 1 just to try to help us meet budget. So we lost that $150,000 that the legislature gave us last year. Additionally, this year, and in a reduced resource package, the Water Authority recommended $220,000 cut on top of that. So lost the $150 from last year, lost $220 more this year. That's what's in the budget profile in front of you now. What we would respectfully request is that the Senate Ag and Natural Resource Budget Committee restore us to the budget that was passed in 2020 by the legislature. That would be an enhancement of $369,000 over what you see in front of you today, and that would be spread equally amongst the 105 counties. The conservation districts are basically boots on the ground, the person that a farmer, rancher, landowner goes to see when they say, I have this issue on my property, I've got some erosion or some sediment problems, I need to deal with it, what's the best program, how do we do it, can you help me fill out the application, or do I need to go to 20 different agencies? They're basically sort of the one-stop shop at the county level that helps them develop those plans, fill out those applications, and then put those conservation measures into practice at the county level. So. Would be happy to answer any questions that I can. I know Mr. Meyerhoff is on the WebEx this morning as well if we get too deep in the weeds for me. But thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, any questions for Sean? Committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Sean. I did want to ask the Department of Agriculture, did you want to have something to add when we finished up yesterday from the department? We didn't get completely through your total presentation, but so I want to make sure you had a chance to overview some of the budget stuff.
I appreciate that, Chairman Kirshen and members of the committee. I was actually just going to take a couple of moments. I'm Kellen Leach. I act as the CFO for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And I was just going to take a couple of moments yesterday to kind of try and put a bow on the package and wrap up a couple of the items that were mentioned yesterday and try and alleviate some of the questions as part of the presentation. And so hopefully there won't be as many questions throughout the rest of it. We actually provided about a 35-page document of our budget overview. I know that Senator Peck had some questions about year-over-year expenditures in 20 actuals going forward in adjusted 21 and 22. Most of the changes between 2021 and 22 can be explained with both state water plan carryover, which Victoria did a good job of explaining. We do have statutory authority to carry over state water plan funds, And due to COVID and some other contracting issues, we have carried over some of those funds, and we're now contracting them and trying to put them on the ground in 21 and 22. And so that's why you would see an increase in those expenditures in 21 and 22. Furthermore, we also have an increase in expenditures in 21 and 22 due to about $3 million in COVID-related CRF funds that our agency received. So that's why you see an influx in funds. Our agency also receives a fairly decent portion of federal funds, which I will point out in just a couple of programs. But our agency has 343 authorized employees. We don't necessarily have those filled on any given day. In all of our numbers, we have incorporated the 10% SGF reduction that was requested in the governor's budget recommendation for fiscal year 22, as well as the 5% shrinkage, which we got into the topic of shrinkage for 21 and 22. And I will note that the good Senator McGinn asked about what our CRF funds were used for, and the CRF funds that were not used for the Securing Local Food Systems program were used for 3 internal projects, not just admin and PPE, but we also used them for technology for county conservation districts so that they could be connected throughout the state of Kansas, as well as an animal health project in case of depopulation of swine during the COVID pandemic. And those projects were all vetted and approved by the Recovery Office and the Spark Task Force. So we didn't just utilize those funds for administrative costs of the agency. So I would be happy to stand for any questions on any specific programs throughout the agency. Our costs in the agency are very stable, especially our salaries and wages. Like I said, most of the changes within the agency are due to changes in federal funding or in those carryover in state water plan funds. So I would be happy to stand for any questions at the appropriate time for our adjusted fiscal year 21 and 22 budget.
What are you guys doing to bring weights and measures up to a standard that is helpful to the Kansas consumer?
Excellent question. And I also believe that our deputy secretary is on WebEx, and I might allow her to respond in a moment as well. In response to the legislative post audit that was requested by yours truly, we have met with the program as recently as last week to try and respond to those audit recommendations, and are trying to go back to the statutory authority of the program to determine the most appropriate means for the program and to respond to those recommendations and to ensure that consumer protection across the state. So we are working with the program on a proactive basis, and we have already been requested to stand before the House Appropriations Committee in March with an update, and we would be more than happy to stand before this committee or Ways and Means or any other committee with an update, because we are proactively working with that program to try and come up with a solution that is both best for the agency and the consumers of Kansas. And I do know that that was noted in the post-audit recommendations. And if anyone else other than Senator McGinn also has feedback, we would love to hear feedback in addition to that legislative post-audit, because as I said, we're trying to work with the program to figure out the best way to institute all of those and to ensure compliance and that those are instituted within the program. We appreciate the opportunity to stand before the committee. I don't see her at the moment, so I will say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems that the conservation districts have been cut quite a bit of money in the last couple of years. And with the COVID adjustment and elimination of 150,000 funding just in 2020. So I'd like to make a proposal that we restore the money back to what they had previously had. The conservation districts would be restored back with $369,264 that will bring it back to what they were in 2020.
I just have a couple questions for Sean. Sorry. I wanted to ask him earlier. So we just heard that you just they received computers from the Department of Ag through the CARES Act?
We received computers.
I thought you said that some of the computers went out to the conservation offices.
Senator, they did not receive computers. They received televisions, television stands, web cameras, and other technology in order for them to have virtual meetings with the Conservation Partnership and other partnership members, but they did not receive computers.
Thank you. And then, Sean, so, I look at conservation 25 years ago, and I think sometimes we try to reinvent what we're doing 25 years ago, and we're not doing that, in some areas. What are the big changes and the big needs of a conservation office today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator. Sean Miller with the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts. The challenges are similar. Obviously, the conservation districts were formed after the Dust Bowl in the 20s and the 30s. So we're sort of the nexus of soil and water conservation as our reservoirs have sort of reached the end of their usable life in some cases. Water quality, sedimentation issues, particularly in eastern Kansas, become a greater concern. So if you're here in Shawnee or Douglas counties and you drive around, you'll see a lot of RAPS programs, watershed restoration and protection. But I did want to point out that the funding that we're talking about today, this aid to local conservation districts, is basically directed directly at staffing costs. It's personnel, it's salaries for those people to be on the ground, or now virtually, I guess, through the TVs and webinar equipment that we have to serve those local producers. So these are not actually the cost share and conservation practice programs. Those may find themselves in 3 or 4 different agencies. This is the personnel to implement, help address the technical expertise to draft those applications and get them filled out. So these are primarily staffing and personnel costs within this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, the changes, I wouldn't say there's not as great a need. I would say the need changes. As you have more development, you have more runoff, you have more of those types of issues. If you literally step just north northeast across the street here in the city of Topeka, you'll see stormwater runoff area between the Celtic Fox and the Catholic Church. They put in buffers, they put in collection strips there. So the need changes a little bit as we move to more of a hardscape in an urban area. You have more runoff, you have more pollutants. So we look at non-point source pollution issues in those areas. May be very different than stream bank stabilization projects in a wet area in northeast Kansas along a creek, which is going to be very different than western Kansas where you don't have a lot of running water. They're able to work with the entities within the county which they serve. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question, but just a comment. The two conservation districts, both Douglas County and Jefferson County, that are in my district, have been really good about letting me know what's going on. I'm always invited to their annual meetings, but I also see articles in our papers about what they're doing, what services they offer, and I believe they're well supported and needed by my constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if Senator Alley can answer this question or if it would be Mr. Miller. On the 369, I am having trouble following the bouncing ball because his motion was about 2020. Mr. Miller, I think, talked about fiscal year 2021. And so I was trying to figure out, because I heard different amounts, different figures. And so I thought, well, if I could try to get a grasp, because the reason I bring this up, Mr. Chairman, last evening on the floor of the Senate, several of us voted to reduce the amount of money the state will have, probably everybody did, either through an amendment or through final action on Senate Bill 22. So my point is, we're going to have to start finding places to save money rather than spend money. So I thought I'd find out. The 369, I'm under the impression that there was a different amount in 2021, and then we had some reductions of enhancements and so forth. So anyway, I don't know who can answer that, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean Miller, Kansas Association of Conservation Districts. Senator Peck, I apologize if I confuse things a little bit because I did in fact flow back and forth between 20 and 21. As staff pointed out yesterday, in the 2020 legislature, so which ended in May or June of 2020, we actually worked on the fiscal year 2021 budget. So the number that I'm talking about here, the 2.342 million, that is what I'm asking to be restored today, was passed by the 20 legislature for fiscal year 2021. So that is the fiscal year that we are currently in. On July 1st of 2020, which was the first day of fiscal year 2021, the governor, due to COVID and decreased revenues expectations, allotted a lot of enhancements. Rather than going in and cutting agency budgets that they were, she allotted the new money that they were being given. So that's the $150,000 that I talked about. Then this year, the Kansas Water Authority recommendation to the governor, which would be for fiscal year 22, which is the budget we're talking about here today, recommended an additional cut of a little over $219,000. So if you restored the 219 and the 150, the suggested cut plus the amount that was allotted, that gets us to the 369, 264 that I've mentioned. That would restore for fiscal year 22 what the legislature recommended and passed for fiscal year 21. It was what, when the legislature left last year, we expected to get. We didn't ultimately get that amount, but it would flow through to FY '22, what the legislature passed for FY '21. I hope I helped you there.
Yes, I can see the numbers now. I appreciate that. That makes a difference. And I'm going to be opposing the 369, Mr. Chairman, but I would be willing to support some restoration of funding. It's a little unusual this year because this is not really a budget committee as such. It's a standing committee, but we're operating as a budget committee. And
I don't disagree with Senator Peck. Because of the actions that we took last night, we're not going to be able to. I mean, I looked at the profile. We're not going to be able to do a lot of 100% additions. I think perhaps we can, if that budget or if that bill gets adjusted, we could probably do a smaller percent. So I'd entertain a motion for a lesser amount to keep it in negotiation. I know you said that the House put it in, but I don't know if the whole body has put it in, if that was a subcommittee. Subcommittee. So just to ensure that it's in there for negotiations, I would entertain a lesser amount, like maybe 200,000. 1 year or whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If my understanding is correct, the House put in 219,000. Is that correct? I'd like to make that another motion that we go to 250, 250,000. Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this issue is particularly sensitive in my district, and we've had agencies work diligently together for many years, if not decades, trying to solve this. And just when they come to an agreement with each other, it sounds like some special interest outside group, the Audubon Society, decides that they're not okay with the agreement that these people had worked so hard to achieve. I would absolutely support the Department of Agriculture in this suit and support the additional $30,000 request for seeking outside counsel, because it's so important that we protect our private property rights and that we support the farmers who feed us. And I don't know when organizations like the Audubon Society will learn to stop biting the hand that feeds them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that water rights are private property rights, and they should be protected.
Mr. Chairman, I should have included this. I would move to support the $30,000 additional request from the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Why wouldn't the Attorney General take care of something like this?
Absolutely. I understand the concern with having the AG's office handle this, and that is an option, I believe. But this issue is the history of it, and all of the specifics, the details would need to come from the Department of Agriculture anyway. I think that they're probably a little better versed in the history of the issue and would have to provide most of the information anyway. So I think that most of those responsibilities will fall on them, and I would suggest that we allow them to handle this lawsuit until the point that they feel that they need to turn it over to the AG's office.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This would probably be a question for our fiscal analyst, unless you know, Mr. Chairman. The money, the additional money, is that SGF or special revenue, or do we know?
I'm assuming it's SGF.
I would assume so, but I thought I'd ask that question to.
Victoria?
Thank you. That's actually a clarifying question that I was going to ask, because it's dependent on the motion. So I was going to ask where you would like the money to come from. I was also assuming state general fund, but I was going to ask. So it's dependent on the motion.
Okay, well, I would prefer, Mr. Chairman, if it was not SGF, but I don't know where to direct it to come from, and I'm not the one that made the motion.
Department want to comment on that? On the money for the $30,000? I just assumed it was SGF.
My name is Kellen Leipsch with KDA. I'm sorry, I missed a portion of that conversation speaking with someone. As Senator Straub discussed about the Attorney Generals, we do have someone who is excellent in water law within KDA. And so in order to keep our seat at the table, we are only seeking the $30,000 to hire outside general counsel that has knowledge of federal law, because the lawsuit has been filed in federal court. And the reason we'd not be utilizing the Attorney General's office is just due to their caseload and the fact that we would be remaining first chair in the lawsuit, because we have worked, as Senator Straub said, with those landowners for decades on that case and maintaining those property rights and those water rights. The agency doesn't necessarily have a position on where the funding would come from. As long as the $30,000, we would have a carryover authority, as the lawsuit would obviously be ongoing, and we would be able to utilize those funds throughout the duration of the lawsuit.
Thank you very much, Kellen. Just as a little bit of history, several years ago when I first came in, that there used to be a water litigation fund. It was a line item in the state SGF for Department of Agriculture and the state to handle suits. We had problems with Colorado, Nebraska. Our neighbors around here taking water, using more water than they were supposed to, and so we had to end up in court with that. And that money was swept every year that we had money in. It was $20 million. It was what the level was supposed to be, and now we don't have any. So that's why we're to the point we are now, taking up lawsuits. $30,000 is an amount of money, but compared to 20 million is what it would take to enforce it. That's what the trade-off is, but that's where we're at. Senator McGinn.
Just clarification, it wasn't swept. It was a drafting error, and it got lapsed.
In the end, but it was swept before, wasn't it, earlier?
It's it's a horrible story. Anyway, it's gone, and
Okay,
it's
well,
too bad.
we agree on that, it's gone. So, anyway, so just, the priority was we need to defend our water rights. And the last suit that the Attorney General did do was the Nebraska water, that they was taking another, what river, Republican River? And they sued saying that Nebraska was getting an extreme more amount of water than what we were acknowledging. And they settled that. I think we got $5 million, and everybody was tickled to death. We won, but they probably got $100 million worth of water out of it. So that's the way that stuff goes. We could dredge up old history here, but kind of interesting. Senator Fagg, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it $30,000, is that just a drop in the bucket from what we're getting into, or, and the second question is, what's the landowners putting into this thing?
The Secretary of Agriculture, as well as the one other member at KDA, one of our Division of Water Resources, Earl Lewis, has also been named as defendants in the case. And so we believe that $30,000 should cover our costs, since we are just seeking outside counsel to help review the litigation. We're not seeking an additional counsel per se for the case. I couldn't comment on what personal parties would be paying into it, because we are just seeking to defend the KDA interest in it.
Senator McGinn.
They also have a water pack, which I think Conservation has partnered with those folks, the irrigators, and then they have a GMD. So I think you got multiple parties that are going to be involved in this.
Senator Alley, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much was spent last year on litigation?
For internal litigation, or?
Similar to this type of suit, was there any?
I would have to review that. I'm not aware of us partaking in any. Yeah, this suit was, we haven't even received the official paperwork, to my knowledge. We haven't officially been served, and we haven't partaken in a federal lawsuit in recent memory of this nature.
You haven't retained counsel for any past suit?
Not to my knowledge.
I'm looking at your budget. It looks like the agency made a recommendation to reduce their resources from SGF in '22 by about $990,000. Is that correct?
That was part of the governor's budget recommendation, that we were to reduce our SGF by 10%, which was almost $1 million.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Senator Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we still need clarification where the funds would come from. I'm tempted to withdraw my second until we know where the funds are coming from, because it sounds like there's a potential that there are funds available. We would just authorize the expenditure of $30,000 from some fund. And I don't know if that's sort of a question or not, but I guess I would have a question. Is there some fund that the $30,000 could come from rather than being appropriated from state general funds? Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm asking you.
I can't guarantee that 100%, so we'll have to find that out.
Or maybe our fiscal analyst or the conferee could.
Since this was not included in our budget, it was not something that we foresaw coming, and so it is not included in our adjusted 21 or 22 budget. So it is a cost that would be hard for us to bear. And so we do not have a litigation fund at KDA. So we would have to find the costs somewhere else within the agency.
I understand that, and that's what I was trying to get at. Do you have some fund balances that if the legislature authorizes could be shifted from that fund to take care of this?
We do have fee funds or other funds with balances, but that would be taken from the authority and the authorized uses of those funds.
I understand that, but we can authorize you to do that, is my point, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to withdraw my second at this time, but
Okay, thank you, Mr. Senator. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that this is an important issue to a lot of people and birds in that area, and would like to see it resolved. Would the committee consider a reduction in what we just approved for the conservation districts down to the 219,000 and make available that 30,000 for this litigation?
Senator Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a question on your fiscal year 22 enhancements through all funds. You show 225,000 all from a state water plan fund for the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program to retire water rights in the Rattlesnake Creek Basin. Could some of that money be used for this?
That is state water plan funding. Theoretically, the $30,000 could be used from state water plan funding with authorization. However, those enhancements were made through the Water Authority and were not approved in the governor's budget recommendation. And additionally, CREP funds are targeted because they are part of a partnership with the Farm Service Agency, and we have been waiting to get those rules promulgated at the federal level. And so we have been holding over funds year over year for a specific and targeted CREP program in the Rattlesnake Creek subbasin. So we could use state water plan funds. I would be leery to use targeted CREP funds for that purpose.
Thank you for that. I'd like to yield to Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the CREP funds, this has changed over the years, and these dollars get 80% federal money. And I think we would be kind of spiting ourselves if we took money out of that, because those dollars are going to the Rattlesnake Creek area. They're actually helping to mitigate the problem that they have. So if we say we're going to throw our 30,000 in to defend ourselves, but we're going to take the money away from the program that helps those irrigators get things back in place, I wouldn't touch that fund. But I do have a possible solution for the 30,000 that I just wanted to suggest. Won't we have more information at Omnibus? And could we ask to put this at Omnibus? And you would have more information about this lawsuit in, late April?
I would have to discuss with our legal counsel about the timeline of it. I believe they're still researching, but I believe that could be an appropriate measure.
I mean, it sounds like you guys have a lot of, like you said, research to do, and we would know more at that time. And if you needed to hurry it up, we could put it in at when we do the final round of the budget, which is generally the third week of March. You could earmark it, when we do the final package of the bill, to review it then. What do you think?
We've done it before on other things, so.
Huh?
We've done it before on other things, so.
Yeah.
We can,
So ask to have this
subcommittee could ask for a.
final review of the 30,000 before the mega budget is packaged. You want to do it sooner than later.
Okay. I'll consult with the chair, Ways and Means. No, I have no problem with that. That would.
It just sounds like we don't have enough information to put 30,000. I get that we're going to need it, but we don't.
This just came up just a couple weeks ago. That was I first heard
This just
about it.
happened.
Yeah. it's fresh off the line here, so we was just trying to get ahead of the game.
So when we go back and deliver, or to the full body, we
Yes.
need to ask that before the final bill is packaged in third week of March, that this item needs to come up.
Up.
And Victoria won't let us forget.
Judy won't either, so, okay, so the second has been withdrawn. We're going to drop the motion, and we're going to proceed with, to go to the Senate Committee, Ways and Means, when we report out, and we'll make those suggestions that we just talked about here, so that we'll review that at omnibus again, have that as part of the discussion. No, I don't need a motion for that. We're just going to do that. That's part of our deliberating process, so.
Be in the write-up, yeah.
Committee, we're still in the deliberation phase. I'd like to, since the state fair people are still here, do you want to jump into the deliberation on that? We have about 15 minutes left, or some motions that need to be made, so I want to give you some time to, we'll move over into the deliberation on state fair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was stand for any questions you might have. I think we presented our budget yesterday. We have still pending $1.3 million as approved by the Budget Committee from state COVID funds. That is now in the Legislative Coordinating Council for action. That is going to be needed for us to start the process of getting the fair underway in September. So,
Committee, any questions for state fair? Senator McGinn.
I just would like to know the likelihood. I guess it was State Finance Council that's meeting this week and not LCC, and I haven't had a chance to talk to any of those individuals. Senator Billinger's now on that, but why they, well, the Legislative Budget Committee already made a recommendation, so he's not on LCC. Need to find out about the folks from LCC, why they won't give you the money that Legislative Budget Committee moved forward.
I think, Senator, I think the issue was that there was going to be some federal money coming down with the COVID bill, and of course, the Fairs and Expositions money, about $500 million, was red penciled and wasn't part of the bill. So I think that was part of the issue.
Any other questions for Mr. Berger? Committee for Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like to see that we at least include the request for the additional $425,000 for seasonal fair employees, and then understand that that should be reviewed if additional funding is allocated from the Finance Council. So that would be a motion to recommend the agency request for $425,000 SGF enhancement request, but
Review it omnibus.
or review it omnibus if the, and it would be not be needed if the 1.3 million is allocated.
Okay, does everybody hear that? It's a motion. Is there a second for that? Motion been made and second. As I understood it, is that depending on what the LC does with the 1.3 million, would be contingent on whether we ask for the 424,000. Is that what you're saying? We take it from.
I want to ask for it and then understand that it would not be necessary if the 1.3 million is allocated.
Okay, that's my fault. But so you're making a motion to apply the 424,000 at this time, and then
Review it omnibus if
review.
the event stimulus money comes in.
Okay. All right. There was a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that? Senator Straub.
I don't know, this just doesn't sit so well with me. It seems that out of the actions of the State Fair Board, by not holding the State Fair last year, that they've somewhat put themselves in this position of not having any funds because they simply didn't hold the fair. And most of the people that I know absolutely would still have attended the state fair last year. But then when we have a need out of no fault of our own for being sued by a special interest group, we can't come up with $30,000, but we can come up with 400 and some $1,000 for something that we could have controlled if we had the authority. But it's, like I said, it's my understanding that that 13-member state fair board decided not to hold that fair. So I guess I have a hard time feeling sorry for decisions that were made by that board.
Okay. Senator McGinn?
Not only did the state fair not decide not to have it, many of the county fairs also decided not to have it. So we're in a time of flux and uncertainty, and I don't think we can go back. And our state fair is an economic driver and a tourism event. And so I don't want to punish them for whatever, because I think everybody was making different kinds of decisions based on the unknown. I think what we want to do today is figure out how to get our state fair back on track so all the 4-H kids can participate again next year.
Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, they still held a number of the livestock shows at the state fair, and my children actually attended. It was just one of those things where I think we could have made better decisions instead of reacting out of fear. And I don't want to reward those type of actions. So I fully support the state fair and understand that it is a huge economic driver, especially for that region, for the whole state. And we'll continue to support it, but if we can come up with $400,000 for a fair, then certainly we can come up with $30,000 to fight a lawsuit against a special interest group.
Thank you. Senator Alley, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question. I guess my math doesn't work real well, but prior to canceling the fair, did the budget include $400,000 for these temporary workers for last year?
Mr. Chair, those dollars would have been generated by activity at the fair. We always carry forward a balance, a strong balance to help pay for those workers. We have about 600 part-time workers. Their wages range from $6.10 to $10 an hour. So that would have been part of what we had started with the fair. And to respond to Senator Straub, there was significant concern that the fair would not have generated any money. In fact, it might have lost money with having to staff fully and have a very low attendance. Many of the vendors were opting out of their contracts, not being a part of the fair. So that was a significant part of the deliberation as far as canceling the fair. It wasn't just a draw the line, not going to have it. It was weighing all those factors into the decision-making process.
Senator Alley?
But I want to continue on for just a moment with that thought process. If you didn't spend the money last year for the temporary workers, do we not have the money this year for those temporary workers?
No, we started with a balance of about $800,000. And with the 90% lack of revenue, and we usually have 500 events on the fairground that generate money. We had only 150. So those all contributed to the revenue deficit. But that $800,000 and the money we generated is going to expire probably this month.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Just to go back to, the motion is to allocate $424,000 pending omnibus, the results of the LLCs providing the money, the $1.3 million to allotment for it. Everybody,
omnibus in the event any other national stimulus money comes down as well.
Okay,
So if stimulus money comes down, we can take this money out.
yeah. Doesn't, you say that any other federal money available comes up, we will, regardless, we're going to go to omnibus with it. We're going to allocate the 424, and then if some kind of money shows up, we will go to omnibus to decide how to use that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a SGF increase of 425. So how much are we actually, when you increase it that much, how much was we originally doing here? Am I missing something on that?
I don't,
Yeah, the agency requested an increase of 425.
I think that's the increase we're talking about here on
Okay.
the motion.
So actually, we're talking about a $1.4 million deal here that we're okaying.
No.
Am I following that right?
Somebody want to clarify that, Victoria?
Thank you for the question, Senator. If you're,
On the enhancement, okay.
just to clarify for the committee, it is just $425,000 that we're discussing here.
Okay.
Hopefully that cleared up.
Okay. Anything else, question to get cleared up? If not, that was a motion in a second, so I need a vote. Everybody understand what we're going to vote for? 424,000 going into the state fair, unless federal money dictates that.
425.
425.
It's $1,000 between friends, right?
Okay. Okay, that's Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What did the House put in, or have you been to the House yet?
This afternoon.
Thank you.
We're trying to get early here, so. Senator Straub.
So let me just clarify, if there are not additional COVID relief funds, federal funds available, then this 425,000 will not come from the state general fund? Is that correct, or it will?
Victoria, I think he will.
Sure, my understanding is you're adding the $425,000, and it's going to be reviewed at omnibus if federal funds are added or LCC money is added, and then they can decide whether to leave it in or take it out. But you are adding $425,000, and it'll be reviewed.
Any other questions on that? Okay, so we'll vote. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Chairs in doubt. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? Motion carries. 4-3.
Thank you.
Committee, it's, our time is out, but we're not going to give up. We've got we can deliberate some more down as the week progresses, but we will be meeting tomorrow, and I will try to get the water office in, that was scheduled for today, so we will tackle your position first, and if we have time, we'll talk about these other items. So, looking for that. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one item that I think we might want to still review from the Department of Ag, which would be related to the grain elevators and the increase in that fee. So I hope we can do that tomorrow.
We've talked about that. That's on the agenda too, so we just didn't get there yet. So we'll certainly do that. With that, committee, thank you for your effort and your time, and we're adjourned.